The year is 2017. The battlefield is Mosul, Iraq. ISIS combatants are preparing to partake in an ambush against Iraqi security forces. Meanwhile, across the river, over 2 miles away, are a pair of sniper spotter teams from Canada. JTF-2 is on the job. Hi guys, Rex here. It was a number of years ago when this was first announced on worldwide news that the longest sniper kill ever recorded had been made at 2.14 miles, 3,450 meters, which is an extremely long shot. Okay, I don't know if you guys realize how far that is, has been made. And at that time, we produced a video explaining some of the potential details of that shot. However, at the time, a lot of the details of the shot were not available. We did not know the exact equipment, we did not know the ammunition, we did not know the exact location to verify the conditions and altitude and everything like that, the atmospherics of the shot. In this video, now that footage has been put into public of the actual shot taking place, we can identify exactly where and when the shot occurred, and I can get into the shot details. I'm going to be covering this from a purely scientific and technical point of view. I'm not going to comment on operational information or any of that stuff. That's not my lane. And also, I'm not going to get into methods or sources. I'm not going to divulge any classified information. Everything I'm going to be talking about will be 100% open source, believe it or not, okay? Now, as many people as I know who are in this profession, having had the pleasure to train with, alongside, and to teach classes for a number of these professionals over the years, I think that this is a very good case study example of what goes into the science of this kind of a ridiculously long-range shot. So we're going to answer some questions. Some people have been asking, hey man, is this shot even possible? Is this fake? Is this just like propaganda? Or did that actually happen? Because there is an extreme amount of holdover required, and the details to get that shot right are extremely complicated, okay? So is that shot even possible? Yes, it is possible, as it was demonstrated by our Canadian neighbors, JTF-2, who are, I might say, probably the very best outfit in the world at long open distances. Being from Canada, I understand that being from North Dakota absolutely is true. When stuff is far away, you figure out how to still hit it, okay? So we're going to talk about, is the shot possible? I'm going to give my detailed shot analysis. I will show you the firing solution. Some of it I will share in even greater detail on my Patreon page for the students there who are partaking in the ELR class, where extreme long-range shooting is a extremely interesting and rewarding science project that it's just fun. And it is useful in certain circumstances, as we'll see when we cover how this shot was made. So first off, when this first was released, we did release a video showing some of the details given the limited information we had. Video of the shot done through a DSLR camera was shared publicly in the United States after, I believe, the Sean Ryan podcast show. The spotter of the shot, Dallas Alexander, as seen on the Sean Ryan podcast show, did release the footage. And so looking at that footage, it's not really hard. After all, this is my profession. This is my job. I do ELR and I film ELR all the time. It's I teach the classes. We coach guys through the problems. So this is something I can pretty easily reverse engineer, given the just very short video clip that we did get from Mr. Alexander, Dallas Alexander, okay? We're not going to get into the politics of his situation, what happened there, why, all the different reasons why, not on YouTube, maybe on the Patreon, but all the reasons why he is being kind of silenced in mainstream media. But we're going to get into the technical shot analysis. So first off, looking at the video, if you guys have seen it, we have a footage first off of the shooting position in the room, which gives us a very strong idea of exactly where the shot was made from. It was no secret that certain hotels in the city of Mosul have been basically used by the Iraqi security forces and their helpers to basically reestablish order during the Battle of Mosul. A quick Google image search of hotels in Mosul will give you a lot of clues, like the shape of the building. As you can see through the windows, you can see the railings, you can see the flower planters, you can also see the carpet in the building, and within a few minutes I was able to identify exactly where they were at. They were located just on the east bank of the Tigris River in the Nineveh Hotel, okay, the Nineveh International, which is no secret that there were a number of Iraqi security forces that had taken that building during the battle. It had a notorious reputation before that because ISIS did take it over and use it for some terrible things. But when the Iraqi security forces took the building back over, we see a lot of news, open source news articles, videos, and documentaries going into kind of what happened there at the hotel. We can tell from the video exactly where it's at. We can see the Tigris River right in the foreground. You can also see that they are not shooting right in the central part of Mosul, but they're on the north side of town where the big bend in the river is, okay? And you're shooting across kind of an open distance, a fair, wide open distance across the flats, the floodlands, if you will, up to where we see the target. Now, if you simply look at exactly what direction they're pointed, you can tell if you get on Google Earth where the shot actually was made on the target, okay? So here is a Google Earth video I'm going to share with you. We are looking at the Earth. Where's Iraq? Okay, so Iraq is here. There's the Arabian Peninsula right here, if you can see that, okay? We're going to zoom in. You can see the Tigris and Euphrates rivers here in the Persian Gulf. Now, as we zoom in a little more, you can see the Tigris River goes here. This is the Euphrates, okay? And this is the dam behind where Mosul Dam is, okay? Now, the city of Mosul is going to be right beyond this branch here. So here's Mosul. We're going to zoom right in on the city, okay? Now, a lot of the fighting during the time of the sniper kill was done in this part of town, okay? There was quite an extensive battle that happened for a few months before that, and ISIS has taken the town for quite a while. And what we can see here is we're looking for a large structure on the Tigris River. On the east side of town, we can determine that from news reports and also from the video taken. Original maps showing the area at the time of the shot, put out by the government and by the news, were indicating somewhere in this part of town, which was a little bit of a wild goose chase because I tried to find it, and it just didn't make sense. The shot did not make sense for a variety of reasons I'm not going to talk about on YouTube. You can talk about more of that on Patreon, okay? But if I scroll around and I look, okay, I can see that first off in the video, they're shooting across a body of water. So there's our first indicator, okay? They're also in a large hotel building, okay? So here's a body of water. It's definitely the Tigris River. It's a very large body of water. And they are shooting not right into a densely populated area, but they're shooting over in the foreground. You can see that they're shooting across a large flood flat here, okay? And so that pretty much points to here or maybe here. So if you follow the river, you can find also, looking at the direction the shot was taken, we can look up into this area here. Now, if we zoom in a little more, we're looking for a large trapezoid-shaped building, okay? And here we have the Nineveh International, okay? So this is the Nineveh International. If you count the stories on there, depending exactly on how you count the stories, you can get the exact altitude above sea level of this building. It's about 12 or 14 stories, depending on how you want to count. And you can basically calculate about where they were sitting, okay? So we're going to get our measuring tool here. And I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to say, now there are a number of reasons I would not go onto the roof or even in the top floor. I would probably not be in the exact top floor. Why? We can talk about that later, okay? Maybe on a different channel, okay? But we can go, and you can watch my distance here. As you can see, the little cursor is showing how far we are. We're only at 1,600 meters, okay? We have to go to how far? 3,450 meters was the distance. We can be very sure, looking at the video footage and just looking at all and just common deduction, we can be very sure this is the final firing position, okay? So basically stretching this out, we're going to make a semicircle 3,450 meters, okay? And I assume, first off, I'm just going to take what they said in terms of the distance of the shot. Could they be exaggerating over or under? Very possible. Could they be giving you disinformation to tell you it's bullcrap? Yes, that's totally possible. However, I'm going to take their word for it first off when I'm looking for it at first, okay? Now, I'm going to do a semicircle. So what I did here, and this only took me about 5 or 10 minutes on Google here, is I know the distance, I know the final firing location after about a 20-minute search. Now I can do a semicircle of 3,450 meters and I can scan the town. I can also know the general direction. Based on shooting mostly straight across the river, based on the orientation of most of the blocks here. You can see the building orientations. See how they're sort of north and south, but maybe a slightly out of whack. You can tell what direction based on looking at the video footage through the optic of the DSLR camera from the vantage point of the FFP. So they're basically shooting kind of in a west-southwest direction, okay? And you can see the first time they zoom in to get a perspective of the range, they zoom in on a structure here, which will be very, very obvious in a minute. So we're going to zoom in here, and we're at 3,450, okay? And so we're somewhere in this area based on just the general angle of the shadows, based on the orientation of the buildings. Okay, so we're going to zoom in on this area here. Now, if you look on the video that was released by the spotter, okay, we can start to scan. So we're looking at 3,400, where are we at? 3,450 meters, okay? And we're going to start scanning here. We're going to look around for the structure, okay? And we're going to zoom a little more. Okay, this looks like this could be it right here, right? What is this? Here's a very, very unique structure. There are several of these in town, of course. But we can look at the roof. We can see the green shape of the roof. We can also see the orientation. This building is pointed towards a town in Saudi Arabia, okay? And so it is angled different than the other buildings. You can see that in the video. You can see most of the east wall, and at a steeper angle you can see the north wall, and that corresponds directly from the line of sight from the firing position, intersecting through the building this way. It's exactly, that's the building that we're looking at, I'm pretty sure, okay? Now, when you zoom back on the video footage of the shot and pause it, you can actually see the area where you can see where the combatants actually were filmed. And so where was that? Now, when you go to the first video footage, it seems to be zoomed in on this structure here. This must have been their TRP, their target reference point, okay? Just a reference point, okay? And from here, you can see it was to the left, and it looks like it was a bit closer off to the side, but to the left, about 4 or 5 building widths of this building here, to the left, somewhere along this line, was where the building and structure was placed that the combatants, the ISIS combatants, were getting ready with their weapons to make an ambush on police, okay? So which building would this have been? So basically you can identify that there was a slope in front of there. You can see the wadis and washouts and little trails, washouts and trails pretty easily, okay? So we're looking at a wadi here. We're also looking at one here, and we see a structure with a small structure on top of it. And if we zoom in on this, you can see the wall appears to be rounded in the video footage. On the left side, here's a rounded wall on the left side. Here's the middle structure. Here is the top structure, and this appears to be a porch of this building. However, due to the forced perspectives of the spotting optic, a magnified optic, which is very, very common if you do a lot of spotting like I do a lot of videotaping at long range for shots like this, okay? And you will see absolutely that this is the building that looks to be part of this, but it's actually behind it. So here we have, and we have the wadi right here. We have this road here. We can confirm to be sure. You can see that this road goes here, and you can see this road going back here. You can look at the trees, and we have a positive identification of the exact location on Google Earth within a few minutes. Within a few minutes, just from looking at the video footage that was shared, okay? So this is the location of the shot. How far would this have been? Where were those guys standing? They were standing right about in here. So if they were standing, hugging this corner right here, they would have been at about 3,448 meters from where I drew the line at the window, okay? Now let's take a look at that, okay? 448 meters. Well, guess what? Snipers don't sit in the window. operationally, for a number of reasons, they sit in the back of the room. And in the video, you can see they are sitting in the back of the room. So they either could have been on a lower level here, which is where I would be, not totally on the top, but towards the top, okay? But somewhere in here, you can absolutely see exactly where they were positioned. And so they were probably in the back of the room on this side somewhere in here, okay? So now we have a location, we have a shot. The shot distance does correspond all the angles of fire. We can now know, we can hold up a compass to this, we can determine the angle of fire. We know the exact altitude of the final firing position and where the target was. So we know in the entire direction of the shot here. We can know the weather by looking at weather reports for Mosul. That day they keep weather records online, open source, going back a number of years. You can absolutely determine what is going on. So, what equipment did these guys have with them? Of course, JTF2, Joint Task Force 2, gets nothing but the best equipment. I know a lot of guys professionally who say these guys are really, really, really serious about their extreme long-range game. And they use the best stuff, okay? Some of the stuff is proprietary. Some of it is classified, particularly the spotting equipment. I'm not going to talk about that, okay? But the rifle being used here was a McMillan C15A2 50 caliber sniper rifle in service since 2000 in Canada. The A2 version was updated in 2017. You can see here, this is the A2 version. This corresponds to what is being used in the video. The Navy would designate this type of rifle as the Mark 15. The civilian version that you can buy commercially is the Tac-50, made by McMillan. I was good friends with Kelly McMillan before he passed. He's in that family. They produce really good stuff. The weight of this weapon is 38 pounds. Length is 60 inches. Barrel length is 29 inches. It is a manually operated bolt-action rifle with a 5-round box-feed magazine. It features the Cadex Defense 60 minute of angle chassis system, which you can see here. That's to give it a little bit more tilt on the optic for extreme long-range shooting. You can see that they are running the Cadex Gen 2 unitized scope mount. You can also verify in this video the optics they're using, the Schmidt and Bender PMII 5 to 25 by 56 millimeter scope, which was the scope we used for our demonstration of what does a target even look like at that distance. Over 2 miles away, what does a target look like due to the atmospheric distortion of mirage through that optic? Is it even possible to see your target while you're engaging it without the use of specialized equipment at that distance? And we're going to talk about that in a second, okay? So ammunition. We now know what ammunition was used for the shot. It was the Raufoss Mark 211 Mod O, the 5.45 inch long cartridges made in Norway. It's an armor-piercing incendiary. Some people have classified it as an explosive match-grade projectile, okay? The projectile type is a 671 grain API. That's an armor-piercing incendiary with a 27 caliber, 215 grain tungsten carbide penetrator. It does have 13 grams of composition A4 explosive and 13.1 grams of number 136 incendiary. These cartridges are loaded with 233 grains of WC-860 propellant. Muzzle velocity varies in the ballpark of 2,600 feet per second to 2,910 feet per second. The muzzle velocity variation in these cartridges are due to the ball powder being used primarily, but also due to a number of internal ballistic variations that we discuss in detail in our in-depth long-range shooting classes that we have on Patreon now and in the Rex Defense courses we've done over the years. The ballistic coefficient of these projectiles vary a little bit depending on how you measure them, but typically they are very similar to the M33 ball, which they're actually designed to be very close to. So we're going to call it 0.670 G1 or 0.343 G7. There are different drag models available to categorize the flight potential. Of course, the internal ballistic variations that exist within the rifle can induce asymmetric swedging of the projectile on its way down the bore due to a variety of alignment issues in the bullet, the cartridge, which can change the ballistic coefficient just a little bit. Especially at long ranges, this could be a big deal. We can see in the video here that they are running suppressors. This is a very large can. This is the CDX-50 Precision Rifle Silencer. It is a reflex style suppressor that slips over the barrel. Now, the entire circular error probability or dispersion of this weapon, how accurate this rifle is right around 2 minutes of angle, okay? So that's going to be about a 12-inch circle at 600 yards approximately, okay? 2 minutes of angle for those in the precision rifle shooting community might not seem like it's accurate enough to do extreme long-range shooting. However, when you consider the statistics of all the different factors involved in ultra long-range shots, like I would classify this as an ultra long-range shot, you will actually come to learn that your out-of-the-barrel performance in terms of your minutes of angle are not near as important as your inputs and your scientific data collection and exactly how you run your numbers in terms of your ballistic inputs. That is going to make the huge difference, okay? We will talk about that in the RX classroom in great detail. I do know that JTF2 has some extremely proprietary modifications to some of their spotting equipment. I'm not going to comment on the spotting equipment being used here, but they have no problem being able to locate targets at long distances. The challenge here is going to be due to the location of the shot, okay? The distance of the shot, typically at these kind of ranges, you are not going to see a human, okay, through the mirage of the air. Now, as the air basically is a lens, as you have hot air fingers coming up from the hot ground, coming up through cool air, you have fingers of rising air, and they're funneling and jetting up. That's what causes what we call mirage. When you're looking through that with magnified optics, trying to get an exact idea of what you're looking at on an object in detail, especially through magnified optics, mirage can be extremely challenging, especially on human-sized targets, even beyond a mile, which is, around 1,600 meters. It's going to be extremely difficult to even identify a human torso at that distance, especially if you're shooting across ground level. So we're going to get into the shot details and explain how they were able to even see their targets located where they were. So the time of the shot we know was in May or June of 2017, according to media reports. The battlefield being Mosul, Iraq, we can know the position, we can know the latitude of approximately where we're at. Now we know the exact location. The final firing position, we have 2 shooter-spotter teams on the upper level of the Nineveh International Hotel. Now this is a pretty large building. You average about 14 feet per floor. Typically in commercial structures like that, you can estimate the height of the building at in between 180 to 200 and some feet tall. And if they are situated towards the upper floors, you can calculate that the position of the shooter, the actual final firing position, was located at approximately 900 feet above sea level. I calculated around 907 feet above sea level due to some of my personal preferences on the detail of where the final firing position were. I'm not going to share that here on the YouTube. The latitude we can know due to the exact location of the FFP is exactly 36.3489 degrees north. The direction of fire we can determine from looking at the map is about 255 degrees west southwest. In the video, we see that originally they are shooting at 2 ISIS fighters, and the flight time of the bullet being 10 seconds. Another shooter joins the group that is targeted, and then a 4th shooter joins the group that is targeted before the impact takes place. So they are originally shooting at about a group of 2 guys, and they ended up lobbing it in on a group of 4 guys by the time the projectile got there. The target location is the southeast corner of an adobe wall near a structure in Kanisa, the neighborhood in northwest Mosul. The altitude of that exact location, according to Google Earth, which is pretty darn close usually, 787 feet above sea level, about 240 meters, okay? The actual horizontal range calculation, if I do Pythagorean calculations for right triangle, you can easily solve for right triangle. We're looking for side B here. Side B equals the square root of c squared minus a squared, okay? We can then find out that the height of the final firing position of the target of side A would be no higher than 131 feet above the target, okay? So they're not any higher than 131 feet above the target, sitting towards the top of the building. We do not know the exact floor where they were sitting, but from my best calculations, that's about as high as they would be. They cannot be any higher than like 160 or 190 feet above them. It would be impossible, even if they were on the roof. We know that the true range to the target, which is the lased range, which they reported, was 3,450 meters. That's 2.14 miles. That's 11,319 feet, or 3,773 yards. That is ridiculously far. We do classes with Rex Defense on ULR and ELR shots going out to a little over 3,000 meters. And I am telling you, that is extremely far, very far, okay? That is like ridiculous far, okay? For small arms fire, maybe not for artillery, but for like even a 50 BMG, that is very, very far. We'll get into the shot details. You will see why, okay? The angle of fire, we can pretty much know that now that we have the position and the altitude of the location of the firing and of the target. We have a 0.664 degree downslope. Now, although they're situated over 100 feet above the target, when you figure out the triangle, okay, is so long and skinny, the slope is very, very minimal. It's less than a degree. It's almost a little more than half of a degree of slope. The cosine of 0.664 degrees is 0.99993285. Now that we know the cosine, we can know the actual horizontal range. Side B makes this distance to the target in terms of its gravitational drop needed to adjust on your scope. You will adjust for 3,449.76811 meters. So just about a half a meter closer than it would have been with the slope. So this gives you an idea of the scale and how things change even with high angle shots at ultra long distances due to the proportions and the extreme long range adjusts how you look at things. Now they were able, you can see through the video that they do have, although there is some mirage present, they do have a decent view of the target. Now all the effects you're going to see over the hot ground and over the river effects you're going to have with the atmosphere over a large body of water are going to be limited, because if you look at the line of sight between the final firing position and the target, the line of sight above the river bottom is about 200 feet over the top of the river, right around 200 feet over the top. So all your ground disturbances, mirage and stuff like that, that's going to extremely obstruct your view of the target if you are closer to ground level, is mitigated being in a higher position in a high-rise building. However, there are some other factors in high-rise buildings. You have the thermal heating asymmetrically as the sun shifts around the building, creating turbulence around the actual structure you're shooting from, which can cause strange winds, which will throw you off in your wind calculations. However, there are other indicators we're going to go over to make that call more effective. So the atmosphere and wind analysis, the lighting, we can tell it is a sunny day, okay? So when we go back in our weather records, it is a sunny day in May or early June, because the exact date is actually still not being told, okay? It is still classified, so we can determine that it was a sunny day being lit from above. We know that it was approximately midday. We can tell that from the shadows. It is not like early in the morning or late in the evening before sunset. It is around midday. Okay, we can look at the wind is coming from approximately a 10 o'clock position left to right. We can tell that by watching the video from the smoke. Smoke is one of the best indicators for wind available on the battlefield. It is very, very much going to tell you exactly the truth on exactly which direction and speed the wind is blowing. I would call that a 2 to 3 mile per hour wind, okay? Now, if we look back in our records, we're looking for a sunny day where we have the wind coming from the south, blowing to the north, which would give these guys from the shooter's perspective. We can look at the angle of fire here, and we have a 10 o'clock wind from northeast. We can basically identify 2 days. I'm not going to tell you which days that I think it is exactly, but these 2 days indicate that we have an 82 to 95 degree temperature during midday. Measurements would have been in between 95 and 105 degrees Fahrenheit for our temperature between our two options for days which would work for our atmosphere. And we also have humidity ranging from 20% on one of the days to 15% on the other day. The barometric pressure was right around 29.63, varying to 29.81, okay? And the wind was 2 to 3 miles per hour. Now, they're going to have, of course, the meteorological measuring equipment, the Kestrel 5700 most likely, with ballistic calculator available to them in their final firing position to get a direct reading of the atmosphere. However, retroactively looking back to see what those conditions were so we can reproduce the shot and see if it matches the video, I can tell you that we're going to average it out at about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, about 17% humidity, 29.7-ish inches of mercury, and 2 to 3 miles per hour. So the conditions are very similar through the 2 possible days where we're looking at the smoke and the lighting. Okay, so the time of flight, there's 3 of them. When we watch the video, and you can hear the report of the rifles, you can hear the supersonic shockwave of the bullet, you can hear the crack of the bullet going out. These are suppressed rifles, so they're very, very quiet. It's not going to be a huge boom, but it can still sound like a big air piston going off. 50 caliber with that, and that's a very well-designed suppressor. They're very effective, but they're still quite loud in person. You can tell the time. You hear actually 2 shots ring out, both shooters fired around, and we can count until the time when the bullet strikes, which matches our video, and which we'll see in a minute matches what we figured out for our dope for the shot. Okay, shot analysis, the total holdover. When I run this through the same type of software that these guys would have been using, okay, that they have been known to use, okay, and I don't have permission to tell you exactly which software that is, but if you run this through the type of software they're going to be using, okay, they use a very specific software for their shots for ELR and ULR purposes, I can tell you exactly what would have been dialed in on the scope. So here is the shot analysis. Our total holdover needed to make the shot, the amount we're going to hold over the top of the target or index or a combination thereof, is going to be around the vicinity of 13,469 inches. That comes out to be about 1,122 feet over the target. 1,122 feet you're holding over the top of the target in order to hit this. Our super elevation, that's the gravitational portion of our drop needed to make this shot, is going to be 98.58 MRADs. The Coriolis portion of our elevation, we're going to have to make a correction to that dope for the elevation because we're shooting mostly in a westward direction due to the spin of the Earth, is 1.01 MRADs. That's a significant amount over the top of the target or underneath if you don't get your direction of fire squared away. Aerodynamic jump is 0.03 MRADs. Our total elevation needed to make this shot is going to be 97.60 MRADs. That is a lot of dope. That is a huge amount of dope. That is more holdover than we have available to us. Those Schmidt and Bender PMII 5 to 25 by 56 millimeter optics, which I have 2 of them. That's exactly the scope they used. They can really only dial in 20 to 26 mils, depending on exactly how it's adjusted. The double turn models, you're not going to get over that, okay? They're not going to go over 26 mils of adjustment. And you only have, if you dial the scope all the way back to 5 power, available in the reticle, which you're dialing the magnification of the scope, which can zoom into 25 power. You're zooming it all the way back to 5 power so you can see the entire first focal plane reticle. You only have approximately 25.5 to 26 milliradians of dope holdover available in the reticle, okay? Now, if you have a little bit of side adjustment in there, a little bit of traverse, you're going to actually lose it on the bottom edge of the scope at like 5 power. So then you basically have to, you only really have about 25 mils maximum of holdover if you crank the scope all the way back to its low power so you can see the entire reticle, okay? With our 26 MRADs indexed, with our 26 additional MRADs of holdover, even counting in our 17.45 MRAD tilted base, our 60 minute of angle scope base that is on the rifle. We still need to come up, that's a total, we have a total available 69.45 MRADs that we could possibly hold. We need to hold or dial or a combination thereof 97.60 MRAD. That leaves us 28.15 MRAD short of being able to even see our target in the rifle optic at the time of the shot. Now, looking at the video that was produced for us, I do see that these rifles are equipped with the KDEX chassis. They very well could have connected after the filming of them in their firing position, a Charlie Tarak, unit, which is made by TACCOM HQ, which is a large prism that I know these guys know how to use. And it is a prism, which is a periscope, which is adjustable on the side.
Just the Charlie Tarak. For those that don't know what we're looking at here, the Charlie Tarak is an optical accessory that simply adds a bunch of elevation adjustment to your scope just by attaching it. You can add anywhere from 1,000 minutes or 300 mils to the scope, anywhere in between without having to change any kind of rails. You don't have to change your rings. You can keep your cheek piece in the same spot, and you can keep your 100-yard zero, and all your regular dope for your optic works as normal. And when you need the additional holdover, you just simply clip this unit on the front. It's basically a group of mirrors, like a periscope, with an exact offset set into it,
which can give you all the holdover you need. The thing rotates inside the body. It magnetically attaches to the front of the optic. We use these at our ELR course to shoot 3,000 meters. They are not using adjustable bases. Looking at this video, this is a fixed one-piece mount, okay, 34 millimeter scope mount. This is not an adjustable IV base or anything like that, where you can adjust the tilt on your scope for ultra long range shots. If they want to see the target through the rifle scope, if the shooter wants to see the bad guys that he is trying to take out, he's going to have to use a TACCOM HQ Charlie Tarak device or something similar, okay? And I do not see them using that in this video, which is surprising. I thought that they would have probably employed something like that. I do know they do know how to use those. However, you can see here that they are not using that. Well, then how in the heck did they do this shot? If they cannot see the target through the scope, not even close, they're looking probably in the sky above the horizon of the target someplace. How can you make the shot? We'll talk about that in a minute during our shot analysis. Our final wind correction on the Traverse due to wind alone is 1.67 MRADs just from the wind. Our Coriolis drift horizontally is going to be based on latitude. That component is 0.42 MRADs adjustment. And then our spin correction that we're going to work into our Traverse adjustment is 1.83 MRADs. All definitely significant. We're going to totally miss the target area if we don't dial those things in or compensate for them somehow. That's a lot of spin drift. That is more than the wind was. Now, when you are talking about ultra long range shots, everything, the proportions start to shift, the things change. When you're looking at field artillery firing tables, the proportions of the effects of the different inputs that you're going to have and the things that are going to affect your shot are very different than what you're going to see from 0 to 1,000 yards. And 1,000 yards is very far too. With small arms, from 0 to 300, you're not going to see any of that. 0 to 1,000, you start to get a tiny bit of a taste. Once you get over a mile, stuff gets very, 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 very fussy. You have to be exactly precise with all your inputs. At ranges like this, stuff plain gets inverted. Your priorities and statistics totally change. And the way you read wind, how important that is, what factors and inputs become critical and which ones become less critical are somewhat counterintuitive. So it's something that is, it's not like you can just extrapolate 1,000 yards shooting out to these kind of distances. Your relationships and all the dynamics of what's going on at those distances start to shift around quite a bit. Our total Traverse adjustment is going to be 3.92 MRADs total. That's well within our ability to hold off if we're not right on the edge of the reticle. The time of flight that we're going to see at 3,450 meters is going to be 9.79 seconds, which correlates very close to what we see in the video here. So I would say that this does look like this is an authentic video of the actual shot, okay? Now, to put to rest the conspiracy theories, yes, it does that. This does match up with the distance. Those are the shot details. That does match up with the video of the shot and the time of flight, okay? The remaining velocity at 3,450 meters is going to be Mach 0.62. It has gone below the speed of sound and is going slower than a 45 ACP at the muzzle, okay? The remaining energy is going to be like a hot pistol round, maybe a 10 millimeter, maybe a 357 Magnum type cartridge for a pistol at point blank range. So you still have enough power to absolutely get the job done, okay? It's going to be like a stout Magnum pistol. It's going to be a little more than a 45 ACP, not quite as much as a 44 Magnum with hot loads, but you're going to be right in there. It's a point blank range pistol. You're going to have enough muzzle energy to take out the target. However, it is not going to have the full 12 to 13,000 foot-pounds of energy you would have had at the muzzle with the 50 BMG. Hit probabilities. How difficult is this shot to make if you figure out the statistics, okay? Now, the standard deviations for system variables and input precision parameters, I'm going to put that all on Patreon. I figured it all out. We have sensitivities of approximately 1 unit for the wind. If you guys are digging this content and would like to nerd out even farther, please check out the Patreon page. We have 5 different levels available. The top 2 are actually completely full, but the bottom 3 levels do have some open slots. We cover a variety of content from the good book, music, news, everything in between. Thank you very much to the patrons who are there, and take some time to at least check it out. We have a lot more content on Patreon than we actually have on YouTube. So at 3,450 meters on an IPSC target, okay, which is a man-sized torso, a man-shaped torso, let's say you have a 2 minute of angle precision threshold. That's your circular error probability of this particular system. That is the specification of that weapon with that ammunition as a system. We're looking at a 2 minute of angle precision performance. Your probability of hitting an IPSC at 3,450 meters, that is the man-sized target, is 0.6%. That means you'd have to fire almost 200 rounds of ammunition to score a hit on a man. So the fact that they scored a hit at that distance is a testament to their prowess. JTF2 really has their stuff squared away, okay? Even if they're walking fire, even if they're walking the round in there, okay? Like you would do with an artillery piece, just kind of, you have a spotter, okay, and you just keep walking it in. With the Rufus ammo, that is absolutely easy to see where it's hitting in an arid environment. You have a very large flash due to the API going off. They ignite when they hit, and you have smoke and you have flash. You're going to see where they're hitting very well. They very well could have walked the fire in there to get their inputs over the course of the battle, right? So that if they keep good logs and have good statistics, then they have good information to dial in, okay? Incredible how far that is. What if they magically somehow got better performance out of that ammunition in that rifle? Let's give them a 1 minute of angle precision potential, okay? So even with a 1 minute of angle, your hit probability is still the same. It's about 0.6-ish%. The sig figs move a little bit. It's almost the same because the statistics, okay? If you want more on statistically what is going on ultra long range shots, and how it's dramatically different inside 1,000 yards or even inside a mile. Once you get past 1,000 yards, or really once you get past a mile, it's a whole different ball game in terms of your priorities, and which things you're concentrating on now have inverted themselves in terms of priority, and now it's on the statistics, the atmosphere, and a number of other things, okay? So you don't really gain that much by getting that much more mechanical precision potential. It's really on the sensitivity of your inputs. It's on the math. It's on how accurate you got your atmospheric calculations and inputs into the system. It's mostly now on the shooter. It has very little to do with the rifle. It's on the shooter's ability to scientifically log and have good experience in taking notes and learning what's going on with the atmosphere. The game totally shifts once you get out there. I've seen it all the time at ULR and ELR courses where guys shooting that far do extremely well sometimes with rifles that have what you would consider very crude precision performance at 100 yards. And they're just killing it at 2,000 or 3,000. Much better than a guy with a rifle who has much tighter groups at 100 yards. Why? Because it is the methods and materials of your inputs and understanding your sensitivities therein to get the math right, to dial in exactly perfectly and measure and knowing how to measure the atmosphere. That's really a game of science at that point. It changes the stats all the way around. The Rufus rounds absolutely have a reputation for doing a lot of damage, even if it hits right next to a target, okay? Especially on soft targets. I believe they were aiming for the wall, okay? So they're trying to make a hit on the adobe wall adjacent to where these guys are hitting. Maybe they'll score a direct hit on a guy, but I think that they were zeroing in on the 8-foot wall. So if you're shooting at an 8 by 8 foot section of the adobe wall that we see in the video here, if that was the target, now you have a 13% probability of a hit, okay? So that means you shoot 9 or 10 rounds, and then you should be able to hit the wall if everything is dialed in real tight. So what's the lesson here? We'll talk about all the engineering and the science of ELR and ULR shots and what we're talking about there on Patreon. So you guys can, I'll leave a link below if you're curious on what we're talking about, or if you want to talk about other stuff on Patreon that is very interesting as well. I'll leave a link for you guys below that really want to nerd out on this, okay? Now, the input sensitivities at this distance are incredible, okay? A 1 mile an hour change in wind at 3,450 meters is going to result in 8 feet of wind drift difference. So if you get the wind wrong by 1 mile per hour, you're going to miss by 8 feet at that distance. That's a lot, okay? If you have 1 degree of temperature off, like if you do not manage your Kestrel, your thermometer perfectly, if you do not understand the methods and materials for operating your temperature reading device to get your inputs correct, you're going to miss by 39 inches. You're going to miss by over 3 feet, 3.3 feet of elevation. You're going to miss that much by getting your temperature wrong by 1 degree. If you get your barometric pressure wrong by 0.01 inches of mercury, you're going to miss by 6 inches. Now, if you get an entire point wrong, if you forget to make your barometric pressure adjustment by 1 inch of mercury, let's say it changes 1 inch of mercury, you're going to miss by 50 feet, 47 feet over the top or underneath the target. Just do a 1 inch of mercury change in the atmosphere. So as you see here, the atmospherics become critical at shots like this. You have to know, you have to understand your inputs, you have to know how to plug them in, and you have to understand how the math works if you want to even get close on your first shot. The humidity, surprisingly, has a very tiny effect, really a fraction of an inch if you're off by 0.1%. If you're off by a full percent on your humidity, it's only about a hand's breadth of mist you're going to have. Humidity has a very small amount to do, even at these ridiculous distances. People do not understand that you really don't need to worry about your humidity. You need to worry about your priorities. Again, this is something that an experienced ULR or ELR shooter will be very well versed with. Your muzzle velocity variation, you're going to have 7.3 feet of adjustment for every 10 foot per second variation you have, okay? So if your velocity was wrong, which that ammo is going to vary, that ammunition has a standard deviation of much over 10 feet per second, but just due to the variation in your ammo, you're going to be 10 to 8 to 20 feet over the top of the target or underneath the target, just due to the fluctuation in standard deviation in the ammunition, okay? That is giving you a better idea of why your initial shot deviation with your 100-yard groups now that doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what group size you have. Your velocity consistency takes priority now. That is what is going to cause the dispersion and a huge cone of fire vertically at those distances. So what are your horizontal and your vertical Coriolis effects at that distance? They're significant, but they're not huge. I'll share more details on how that works on the Patreon channel as a thank you to the patrons for supporting the show. The terminal analysis of this shot, okay? So having done a lot of shooting, I've been shooting those big bores for a long time, almost 20 years, I suppose. That's not a huge amount of experience compared to some guys that I know, but it's a decent amount of experience shooting 50 calibers and stuff like that at long range. I've actually been shooting 50 caliber projectiles for over 25 years, actually, come to think of it, going back to my childhood with black powder cartridges, okay, at extreme long ranges. And so my terminal analysis, we can tell that the projectile appears to have struck the wall behind them, or perhaps it clipped that fourth guy who hobbled away. Somewhere in the leg is what it appears on the footage to me. I know that if he gets hit square with the 50 BMG with API rounds, somewhere in the torso, even though you're only down to, 700 some foot-pounds of energy, which is a powerful pistol, that's still going to take you out of business. And although, what about the Mark 211 Mod O? Is that going to explode inside a soft target? Now, the testing they've done in Norway on the ammunition indicates that only 50% of soft targets are going to even ignite the round at all. And if it does ignite, it's going to have a 30-degree cone of fire behind the target with all the fragmentation, okay? And so the explosion is going to happen upon the exiting area. So if it did clip a guy in the legs and it was enough, which I don't think it would be, to ignite that projectile in the air, then you can have a little bit of fragmentation, which could have hit somebody. Or if the projectile hit the object that's sort of maybe in front of them there, we can't tell exactly what that is. If the projectile hit something else or ricocheted off the ground, it could have exploded on the ground towards the feet, or it could have most likely exploded, what it appears to have happened, exploded on the wall right behind the guys. And either secondary projectiles, secondary fragmentation, injured one of the guys in the leg, or maybe they clipped the leg at best. Now, the Canadian government took some time to go ahead and claim this as a kill, and then some of the news reports claim this as a 4-in-1 kill. They actually took out 4 insurgents, but as you can see in the video that was released, the 3 of the guys ran away with great speed, and one of them, I'd like to think, hobbled away and rethought his life. Maybe it was a short life. Maybe he bled out. We do not know what happened. I did not talk to the guy, okay? So that is my shot analysis. I do believe that it was what I would call a hit. I would definitely call that a hit because the guy got hit by something. He hobbled away from there in pain, okay? Was it a kill? That's for governments to decide how they want to report that stuff. Maybe that's why also the shooters did not really give their names, because they kind of knew that, the government was going to do what governments do. That's very common, going back to Vasily Zaitsev, the psychological effect on the battlefield, the propaganda use of those kind of deals is very powerful. Now that the battle is won, we can kind of admit that a little bit. But I'm not going to give these guys any grief at all. That is an incredible feat to hit even the wall at that distance within 1 or 2 shots, because I do not see, when I'm looking at the video, this is my full shot analysis, I do not see a pile of brass laying around. It does, unless they police that up and they were trying to make it look like that was their first or second shot. I do not see that they were just hammering away all day trying to make that hit, okay? If they were, they picked up their brass so that we couldn't see it, okay? But most people don't remember to pick up their brass. Like on the hunting shows where they're bullshitting everybody, I can tell. I know all the tricks. I videotape guys shooting long range all the time. I know what happens, okay? And yeah, it appears that this is the first and second shots, which were released almost simultaneously, hit the guy at that distance is incredible. Plus, JTF2 are elite soldiers. All my respect to those guys for their discipline in getting the science down that good. And what they do with their ELR, they're the best. I mean, I don't know anybody in the world who could get a shot on a wall like that. In the first shot or the first 2 shots, normally you got to hammer away for a while. If you look at guys who do a lot of the world records for ELR shots, there's no real formal way to kind of hand those records out. But most of these guys are shooting quite a number of rounds before they connect with a hit. Most of these guys are, firing 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 shots. That is the real life reality of how far this is. I appreciate JTF2 and everything they do to keep Canada and the United States free of that kind of nonsense on the earth. So my hat's off to you, gentlemen. That's incredible. Good job, okay? And to the Canadian government, I don't know about that. I'll just be quiet. If you guys enjoy this video, if you enjoy the rants, or if you want to see more on the details of this shot, I'll give that on Patreon. Also, we talk about everything else over there, okay? Been talking about the space alien, false flag conspiracy coming up around the corner. I'm always talking about the good stuff, the good book, where sometimes we have brewski hour. We sit down and drink some beer and get extremely silly. We have a good time on Patreon. If you digs what we got to say, please subscribe here on YouTube. I produce this for you guys, but I appreciate you. Check it out. We got a lot of stuff here on YouTube. Lots of neat stuff to check out. Subscribe, hit that bell. Man, I'll tell you what, I'm being systematically shadow banned because they do not like the truth. I just told you guys the truth on this shot, didn't I? I did. I told you the dope. I told you where it was. I told you exactly what I think happened. And some people don't like that. So if you appreciate a truthful commentary on what's going on in the world, absolutely, please subscribe and ring the bell. Maybe I can break out of the shadow band somehow. If not, that's fine. Join us on Patreon, where I do over 60 or 70 posts per month. So several posts per day, typically on Patreon. A lot more information there. You are totally missing out on that. Of course, if you went to Barnes & Noble and wanted all the details on this kind of stuff, you would purchase a book, right? You'd purchase a book, man. So please purchase your little slot in investing in our operation here, what I do here, and join us on Patreon for a lot more information, okay? Look at it as buying a really cool book that just keeps on giving, that you can talk to the pages, which is me, and I'll speak back to you. You can PM me questions. If you're on Patreon, I'll take all my questions over there. That's me reciprocating my appreciation for people supporting the operation, okay? Hopefully you guys enjoyed this here on YouTube. You guys have a great day. Rex out.